Hello, my name is Paul Nixon, and thanks for tuning in. I hope you're all doing well. Getting used to the new normal now, as I certainly am in Essex in the United Kingdom. I'm going to tell you today how to use regimental numbers to assist your research into your military ancestors. First, a little bit about me. I've worked at Findmypast since August 2010, and I head up the UK licensing effort for Findmypast. I can date my interest in military records or the British Army back to probably 1970s. My grandfather was a First World War soldier. I always regretted never speaking to him more about his service, and after he died in 1980, I set about trying to rectify that and to educate myself more on the British Army, and that interest has expanded from First World War backwards in time to the Victorian Army and forwards to the present day, although I'm less knowledgeable about more modern warfare. But in any event, I have a blog outside of work called Army Service Numbers, which is self-explanatory once you go in there and have a look at it. And I also own the British Army Ancestors website, which allows people to search 12 million records, many of those hosted by Findmypast, and add photos. Very simple concept, and currently 70,000 photos on that site. So what we'll be looking at today is the structure of the British Army, how regimental numbers and later army numbers are issued, and what these can tell you about a soldier, how you can use those numbers to work out details of a soldier's service. And that's particularly important for those of you who have First World War British Army ancestors, for whom no service record survives. And I'll explain more of that as we go on. I became interested in the whole regimental numbers piece when I started researching the men and women of Chailey in Sussex. So Chailey's a little community in Sussex. It's a very wealthy community, so wealthy that the houses don't have numbers, they all have names. But in any event, I was loaned an autograph album that was kept by a VAD nurse when she nursed there during the First World War. And in this album, there were names of soldiers who were being looked after by Nurse Oliver, who's the woman on the left in the photo that you can see now. And I started researching those men, trying to find out a bit more about them. And it went from there, from the men in the book to the men and women of Chailey, and ended up with a database of 600 men. And for many of those men, there were no service records that survived. There was just medal index card. At the time, the medal index cards hadn't been published online, medal rolls hadn't been published online, so in order for me to find out more about these people, it was a case of going to the National Archives to go through microfilm and look at microfiche. And ironically, it was only when I moved to India in 2003 that I started progressing this in more detail and said to myself, well, surely there's more that we can find out about these men. What's in the number? If the only information you have is a medal index card, what does that regimental number tell you? And so I started looking more closely at regimental numbers and how those were issued, and soon started logging the patterns of issue. So that's how it all began for me, and I had good success with Chailey, and as a result of that, I launched my Army Service Numbers blog, which is, I think, about 12 years old now, maybe more than that. But anyway, that's the background. A little bit about numbers. So the British Army, at the time of Waterloo, the soldiers didn't have regimental numbers, but the first number series began in 1829 and lasted until 1856. Started from number 1, and it was regimental numbers by regiment. In those days it was regiments of foot. So in the example I've given you there, the 44th Foot would become the Essex Regiment in due course, and I've just picked those numbers from Findmypast to show you very, very broadly how the sequential numbering worked. So 288, Francis Armstrong, joined in November 1831, and then the next man, 289, whoever he was, would have joined the same day or a couple of days later, and then so on and so forth. So you see a regular pattern. The next number series, number series 2, began in 1856 and lasted until 1873. and I'll read this, although you can all read it for yourself for that matter. It's been determined, said a circular of 9th of September 1856, that a new series of numbers shall be introduced for soldiers after the 1st of October next. You will therefore be pleased to issue instructions that recruits enlisted onward after that date, when finally approved for the regiment or depot under your command, shall be designated regimental numbers commencing from 1 instead of continuing the present series. So that's very clear there. So you would expect to see from 1856 for the different regiments, infantry regiments we're talking about here, the numbers beginning at number 1. (1873 to 1881) is number series 3. This is an important time. It's probably the most confusing, actually, looking at the numbers. This was brought about by the creation of Cardwell's Localisation Committee recommendations in 1873, which created sub-brigade district depots on the 1st of April that year. So that was the idea of pairing regiments up, and with the district sub-brigade district depot as the administrative centre, later named infantry brigade depots. So you had the regiments paired then. Now, for the first 25 regiments of foot, so the 1st Regiment of Foot, which was the Royal Scots, they had 2 battalions. The 2nd Regiment of Foot, which was the Queen's, would become the Queen's Royal West Surrey Regiment, that had 2 battalions as well, and the first 25 regiments of foot each had 2 battalions, so there was no pairing needed for those particular regiments. But as you then move on through the regiments of foot, they were paired, so the 26 would have been paired with another regiment, and so on and so forth. The numbers as they were written on the attestation papers and generally were supposed to be expressed with the brigade number written above and then the regimental number underneath, and you can see from this extract here for James Beer that it looks a bit of a mess. It's not very clear, and you can see 772 written after his name and then again in front of his name, and there's something written above that 772 as well. It's a little messy, his particular paper, but you can see on there Staff Paymaster 44th Regimental District, and he actually, and the Brigade Regiment or Corps also written there on the left, which is the 44th, so that's the 44th Regiment of Foot. So it would have been 44 Brigade / 772 for his number. Same number series. I've just used this as an illustration again of how the numbers were issued. So if I just click these arrows in, you'll see there that you've got number 283, which was issued to Henry Allen on the 27th of May 1876, and also on the same day you've got number 302 issued to Charles Alexander on the 27th of May 1876. So the logic would be that if your man had a number between 284 and 301, that he probably also enlisted on that same day, because you've got 283 being issued, then the next man in the queue will get 284, the next man 285, and so on. So that's the logic of the sequential regimental number issuing. And then it's another one here. You've got 316 issued on the 22nd of June 1876. So between the 27th of May and the 22nd of June that year, you've got 14 people joining that particular regiment, which I think was the 67th Foot. I don't have that information right in front of me. But that document is from an embarkation roll which is held at the British Library in the India Office collection. This hasn't been digitised. It's an extremely useful source of information. I've been there, I've photographed the 5 registers, and so I have my own copies of this, but it hasn't been digitised by anybody at this point in time. But it is a useful resource. Series number 4 covers the period 1881 to 1920, and 1881, July 1881 is an important date for the British Army, because that's when the regiments of foot ceased to be regiments of foot and were given county names instead. So in this case, for this particular man, Michael Bride, he joined the Royal Munster Fusiliers at Chailey on the 11th of July 1881, and he was the first man there to join the new newly created Royal Munster Fusiliers, and so he's got the number 1 there, and the person who's filled in the form isn't really sure how to put his number down there, so he's adopted the old brigade style of numbering and put RMF above the number 1. He can't be blamed for doing that, and there's nothing wrong with it necessarily. It was just unnecessary to express the number as that. But in any event, that number series is the one that is most frequently seen probably in soldiers' records, because it lasted from 1881 to 1920 when army numbers replaced regimental numbers, and so I'm going to have more to say about this particular number series now. So if we take a typical line infantry regiment of the British Army, and in 1899, so just before the Boer War, and look at the Highland Light Infantry for no other reason than it's representative, I suppose, of most infantry regiments. So you've got 2 regular battalions for the HLI. So you've got the 1st Battalion, which was formerly the 71st Foot, and that was paired in 1873 through Carbell's reforms with the 74th Foot. So the 71st Foot became the 1st Battalion, and the 2nd Battalion was what had been the 74th Foot. So they became the 1st and 2nd Battalion Highland Light Infantry. Then you had 2 militia battalions with the 3rd and 4th Battalion, and then after that you had 5 volunteer battalions. So the 1st Volunteer Battalion was based in Glasgow, 2nd in Over Newton, etc. So that's the structure of the British Army in 1899. So regular battalions, one typically based at home, the other one based overseas. Militia battalions, home service only, and volunteer battalions, home service only as well. So just hold that image, hold that thought. We'll return to this shortly. So the regimental depot for the British Army was the administrative heart of the regiment, of any regiment. It had a small permanent staff of around 4 officers and 60 men who were drawn from 2 regular battalions, plus NCOs who formed the permanent staff of each militia battalion. And in addition to that, you had admin staff, Army Medical Corps and Army Service Corps to carry out duties connected with that regimental district. But it was the administrative heart of the regiment. It's where recruits would go when they enlisted in the army, generally would go to the regimental depot, and it was at the regimental depot that the number was issued. So you might attest in London, let's say, for argument's sake, on one day, on let's say the 1st of February, and then you'd join the regiment possibly on the 2nd of February, maybe the same day, depending on where the regiment was. And it was on that, although your service started from the day you were tested, your regimental number was issued from the day you presented at the regimental depot. So this quote is from the Army Book for the British Empire, published by HMSO in 1893. It's a great book. I've got a copy on my shelf, which is always within arm's length, but it is also available in digital format. So if you go to Internet Archive and type in Army Book for the British Empire, you can download it, and it's free of charge. And it's an excellent book, really excellent. I can't recommend it highly enough for anybody with an interest in the army at that period of time. So it says the chief work of the depot in peacetime is to enlist recruits for the regiment to both the regular and militia battalions, and to enter them for training and discipline as soldiers. Many a high-spirited lad will resent being ordered about in military fashion when he first joins, etc., etc. You can read the rest. The NCOs will set them a good example, giving them sound advice and cheerfully assisting them in the work they're called upon to perform in their barrack rooms. Now, you can imagine an NCO of many years standing cheerfully assisting a new recruit, can't you? But anyway, so those italics and underlines are mine. I don't think there was much cheerful assistance that would have been given. But in any event, that's where the soldier learnt his trade, at the depot. He was typically there for 12 weeks and would then go on to the home battalion, wherever that was based, somewhere in the UK. So let's have a look at a particular man. We'll look at Michael Hooper, who again is Royal Dublin Fusiliers, and I can't remember now why I chose Royal Dublin Fusiliers, but his case will serve us well in this example. So this particular man enlisted with the Royal Dublin Fusiliers on the 8th of June 1894, and his number was number 5089. So he was the 5,089th man to be issued with a number by that particular regiment. So it was issued from the depot, and it was issued to career soldiers. And those career soldiers served in the depot, in the 1st Battalion, in the 2nd Battalion, and when they moved between the depot 1st and 2nd, their number didn't change. That number was for that series. It's for regular soldiers. So on the 8th of June 1894, as the record says, he attested at the depot. 10 weeks after attesting and having undergone basic training at the depot, he was posted to the Home Battalion, which was the 1st Battalion Royal Dublin Fusiliers. You can see that date on there. And then he was posted on the 12th of February 1896 to the 2nd Battalion. And the 1st Battalion had been in Sheffield, but the 2nd Battalion was overseas in Quetta, in what is now Pakistan, but was India at the time. 25th of September 1902, having served with the 2nd RDF for 6 years overseas and 6 years and 7 months, he was posted back to the Regimental depot, and then in October 1902 he was transferred to the Army Reserve, having served 8 years and 4 months with the colours. A little under 3 months before his first period of engagement was due to expire, he re-engaged with Class D of the Army Reserve, which gave him 4 more years on the reserve. So he was due to come out of the army in 1906, but he rejoined for 4 months as a reservist. And Frank Richards, author of Old Soldiers Never Die, was also a Section D reservist when Britain went to war in August 1914. So in June 1910, having completed his 4 years additional time as a Section D reservist, he was released from the British Army. So he'd signed up for 12 years originally, a combination of colour service and reserve service, and then extended his reserve service for a further 4 years. So he'd served 16 years, and he was discharged to the day after having served 16 years. For the final 4 years, when he was a Class D Army Reservist, and for that matter when he was on the reserve, the normal reserve, he was paid 6p a day. Now that sum was paid 4p a day. The equivalent of 4p a day was paid in quarterly instalments, and if he'd then attended his regular drills throughout the year, he was paid the balance in a single payment. So that's the balance of 365 times 2p. He was paid that balance in a single payment. But as I say, he only got that if he'd attended all the drills, etc. And if he was anything like Frank Richards, he'd use the money to have a jolly good drink with his friends. So throughout his time with the Royal Dublin Fusiliers, and with all the postings between those battalions and transfers to the Army Reserve and Section D Reserve, Michael Hooper kept that original number, 5089. That was his number. And now, having been discharged from the army, that number was redundant. It wouldn't be reissued. It wouldn't be reused. It wouldn't be reassigned, and it wouldn't be transferred. So in that sense, only Michael Hooper's number was unique. So if he decided, having come out of the army after his 16 years, if he'd had second thoughts that night and said, "Okay, I'm going to go back to the army," he wouldn't have had that number issued to him again. He'd have had to be issued with a new number. So that was his number, and it was unique to him for those battalions in the Royal Dublin Fusiliers. But of course, you would find other men with the number 5089 in the Essex Regiment, in the Rifle Brigade, in the Gloucestershire's. All the regiments started numbering from 1 in 1881, and they all numbered sequentially. All numbers except the Rifle Brigade, actually, but all those other line infantry regiments started numbering from 1, and so you would find duplicates across the other regiments with the same number appearing. So this paragraph from King's Regulations is quite telling, and the same paragraph appears in Queen's Regulations for the Victorian era as well, more or less. So it states that if a man is transferred, deserts, is discharged, or dies, the regimental number will not be given to any other soldier. So numbers aren't reused. That's very important to note, and people have asked me many times and continue to ask, could the man's number have been reused or issued to somebody else? No is the answer. This isn't a Findmypast medal index card image, as many of you will know, but the point is, it's a rhetorical question. Is this the same Michael Hooper? I don't know. I mean, it could well be. The fact that he was serving as a regular soldier for so many years, was discharged in 1914, and then the war would have started shortly after that. I think it's probably a strong case that he did rejoin his old regiment. That number dates to October 1914, and this particular man, whether or not it's him, then went on to serve with the Lancashire Fusiliers and the Labour Corps. So, having said that regimental numbers were issued sequentially, they were for the most part, and really regimental numbers up until 1914 are fairly easy to understand. But there is an exception here, and that's the volunteer service companies of the Boer War. So, volunteer service companies were formed out of volunteer force battalions. So that's the equivalent to the territorial force. Before 1908, it was the volunteer force, then the territorial force. Men from the volunteer force formed volunteer service companies, and those companies issued men with numbers which were, there had to be an interval of 1,000, clear 1,000, between the last number that had been issued to a regular soldier and then to the men of the volunteer service companies. So you do see that, you see gaps in numbering, and you see one man who could enlist as a regular soldier with a number of thousands on the 1st of March, and then a volunteer service company man joins the same day or the day after, and his number is 2,000. That's how it should have worked. So you have that clear gap, and once you start looking at those records, you see patterns emerging, and again you'll find those on Findmypast. So let's go forward a few years to 1908, to the Army reforms of 1908. These reforms affected the militia, so the militia became the Special Reserve and the Extra Reserve. Those numbers were administered by the War Office. The volunteer force, as I mentioned a minute ago, became the Territorial force, and that was administered by county associations. But no regulations or even guidance were issued by the War Office on how those new battalions were to be numbered. And so there's no consistency in numbering. Some units continued with previous numbering sequences that they'd had when they were the volunteer force, and others started from one. Most did start from one. But the problem was compounded by, in some areas, where a battalion might be administered by more than one county association. That particularly happens in Wales, in rural Wales, and in rural Scotland as well. So I'm thinking of the 8th Royal Scots, for instance. They had 3 county associations administering men who joined different companies in that battalion. 7th Battalion Royal Welsh Fusiliers was similar. I think that had 3 county associations administering as well. So you might have one association would be administering a particular region, which might account for 2 companies in a battalion. Another one would do 4 companies, and another one do 4 companies. So you had different county associations administering men, and they would generally had an agreement between themselves that one association would use a number block between 1 and 2,000, let's say, and the other one would start from 3,000 to 5,000, let's say, and so on and so forth. So again, when you get into the nitty-gritty of regimental numbers for different battalions, and particularly the ones in rural areas, you'll often find different number series for the same battalion, and that's the reason why, because it's being administered by a different county association. So just go back to our example earlier, which I talked about, which was the Highland Light Infantry. So in 1899, Boer War era, you had 2 regular battalions, 2 militia battalions, and 5 volunteer battalions. Okay. Fast forward to 1908, and now you still have the 1st and 2nd Battalion and the Regimental Depot using one number series. So all these different colours here are all different number series, okay? So you've got one number series for the depot, the 1st and the 2nd, the regular soldiers. You have another number series for the 3rd Special Reserve Battalion, and the 4th Extra Reserve Battalion is another number series. Then you've got the Territorial Force battalions now, had been volunteer force, and now Territorial Force. So you've got the 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th and 9th. All of those battalions each have their own separate number series. So there's 8 distinct regimental number series in use by that single regiment. And the ones that I've underlined continued the number series that had been in force before. So the 3rd and the 4th Special Reserve and Extra Reserve Battalions used the same number series. They just continued with those number series that had been used by the 3rd and 4th Militia Battalions. And the 8th Lanarkshire Battalion continued with the series that had been in use with what would have been the 4th, I think, Volunteer Battalion for the Highland Light Infantry. Now, the repetition of numbers, again, is important to note. So you might find, for the Highland Light Infantry, for instance, that you'll have a man with a number 5,000, and that 5,000 number might appear in the Special Reserve Battalion, and it might appear in the Extra Reserve Battalion as well. And there's not necessarily a way of telling that easily at first glance. So numbers are repeated, and they can be repeated because the numbers are used in different number series for the different battalions. So that's very important to remember. So again, Essex Regiment, my local regiment, and I just put that in just as an example of this same rule being applied nationwide. Again, Regimental Depot 1st and 2nd Battalion, they have one number series. The 3rd Special Reserve Battalion, which had previously been the 3rd and the 4th Militia Battalions, has its own number series, and then you've got the Territorial Force Battalions as well, each of them based in those areas in square brackets. So for the Essex Regiment, there were 7 distinct regimental number series being used, or 8, really, if you include the 2 being used by the 3rd Battalion. An analysis of regimental numbers over time gives a very good indication of recruitment rates. So you can look at the regimental numbers. If number 3,000 is joining in the 1st of January one year, and number 6,000 is joining the second year, you can see that 3,000 men have joined. But of course, the actual recruitment rate was far, far lower. The average recruitment rate across British the British Army Line Infantry between 1881 and 1911 was 355 recruits per annum. The Essex Regiment averaged 324, so that placed it 45th out of 69 line regiments, and the Essex Regiment Special Reserve recruited between 200 and 300 men per annum. The Essex Regiment Territorial Force battalions varied. Some years were very good, and some years were quite poor. I think generally in 1908, when the Territorial Force was formed, a lot of men did move across from the volunteer force to the TF, but I think a lot of battalions struggled in subsequent years. So here's a little snapshot of Essex Regiment Territorial Force recruitment patterns between April 1908 and August 1914. So you can see there that all of those battalions started numbering from 1 in April 1908. And this, by the way, is from a spreadsheet, an Excel spreadsheet that I started putting together way back, when I moved to India, as I said. But and I would plot, looking at Findmypast and other sites, looking at for service records, and just to identify when a man joined, what number he was given, and therefore plotting over time how the numbers were issued. So you can see there that all the battalions started numbering from 1 in April 1908, and you can see how many men joined. So let's take the 4th Battalion, for instance, and look at 1910. On the 23rd of February 1910, number 948 was issued to a soldier joining. And then on January the 3rd, number 1054 was issued to a recruit. So you can see that between February 1910 and January the 3rd, 1911, only 50, how many is that? No, it's more than that, isn't it? It's 106 people, 106 men joined that particular battalion in just under a year. So very low, very low. But, another reason for not recruiting was that battalions reached their establishment. If you have enough men, there's no need to recruit more men. You have to turn the tap off, basically, and when you have vacancies, then you turn the tap back on again. But recruiting does vary, as you can see from that snapshot there. And here again is a snapshot of the Essex Regiment in August 1914. So at this stage in August 1914, by the 11th of August, the regular battalions had recruited 10,570 men. So that's the number that's being issued in 11th of August 1914. The 3rd Special Reserve Battalion, that's the number there, and then these other 4th Battalion, 5th Battalion, and so on and so forth. So let's say, for argument's sake, your ancestor did serve with the Essex Regiment and served with the 5th Battalion, and his number was below 2184, then you can say straight away that, well, he must have joined the Essex Regiment either on the 5th of August or well before that, depending on how low his number is. You know, if his number's 1800, he would have joined somewhere before 5th of August 1914. And again, as I say, I know that because I've got that data myself, and that's what I've published on my British Army Ancestors, on my Army Service Numbers blog. So the type of numbering arrangement is not exclusive to the Essex Regiment, and it's seen in other regiments too. Some regiments prefix the numbers with the L prefix for regular soldiers, career soldiers, and in some instances number series was set aside for specific battalions, and that's commonly seen in some PALS battalions. So here's an example: Liverpool PALS. I've just plotted some numbers down there as a result of research I've done. So that's helpful, because if your man was number 18,000, then he's a member of the 19th Battalion. If he's 17,000, he's a member of the 18th Battalion. So that's the importance of plotting the numbers, because there was some logic to the issuing of numbers. You'll find that regimental number prefixes are widely used across all corps and can give clues about service. So G or GS is general service and denotes wartime enlistment. And similarly, the prefix S in a Highland regiment denotes wartime enlistment. Numbers often indicate battalions, so that example there is for the Tyneside Irish, and some prefixes also belong to specific battalions. So for instance, SD belongs to the South Down battalions of the Royal Sussex Regiment. And again, my Army Service Numbers blog has a separate page devoted to number prefixes. With all the confusion and the duplication in numbering, the Territorial Force in 1917 underwent a complete renumbering exercise. So at that point, beginning in January 17, the Territorial Force units started to be renumbered. Men were issued with 6-digit numbers within blocks, and those blocks are published. You can look at them, find them on the Long Trail website and elsewhere. But again, if you look at the Essex Regiment, all those men who'd been in the 4th Battalion were now issued with new numbers beginning at 200001 and going up to 250000. And again, those numbers were issued in sequential order. So the longest serving Territorial Force man was given the lowest number. He was followed by the next longest serving man, and so on. So again, for the most part with the regiments, there's logic there. So you can tell by the number, by his 6-digit number, when he must have originally have enlisted. So the number 2011 there, 200011 would tie back to a number. Might be number 17, 18, 19, etc. Back in 1908. So there definitely is logic there, and those numbers were issued to men even if men had been killed. Actually, so I bought actually this week some medals from a man who had served with the 4th Lincolnshire Regiment, who was killed in action on the 2nd of July, 1916. He was issued with a 6-digit number in January 1917, so that's 5 months after he was killed, and he was issued with that number because at that point in time his death had not been officially confirmed. He was only missing in action. But it's the 6-digit number that appears on his headstone in France, even though he would never have been alive to have received that, and of course he died months before that whole series was even brought in. So that's the reason why sometimes you see a man with a 6-digit number who was killed sometime previously. So again, my Army Service Numbers blog contains regimental number information on all foot guard regiments, all regular infantry, household and line cavalry, yeomanry, and plus many militia, special reserve and territorial force. And I've also published separately other rolls of other ranks who were prisoners of war in 1914. So do use it. You'll find lots of shortcuts on there, information about regimental numbers, which you may find interesting. For Findmypast, it's got service and pension records for the British Army between 1760 and 1920. And here are the tips. Here's how to go about finding your man, or finding information about when he might have joined up. So start by looking for men with regimental numbers close to the number that you're looking for. Use wildcard searching, and then note all relevant numbers and record the dates. And remember, as I said earlier, a man's number is issued the day he joined his regiment at the regimental depot. That could be the same day, or it could be several days, even months in the case of the Derby scheme, after he originally attested. But do use the wildcards. I can't stress this enough, and I use the wildcards frequently. It's one of the beauties of Findmypast, actually, that it's very flexible with the wildcard. So in this example, and I'm looking for these records in the British Army Service Records section on Findmypast. So you'd go to, and I'll talk you through this in a minute, but go to the A to Z search, start typing in British Army Service Records, and then when you get to that database, you need to start typing in the word Somerset Yeomanry. So if you just were to go to that collection and type Somerset Yeomanry, you get 16 results. If you type in West Somerset Yeomanry, you get 650 results. But if you type in star wildcard Somerset Yeomanry, you get close to 1500 results, and that's because the search has returned results for West Somerset Yeomanry and North Somerset Yeomanry. So the wildcard is very important to use. And again, I use an example often for the Argyll and Southern Highlanders. There are so many ways of writing that regiment down, and so many ways in which it's been transcribed, that your best bet when searching for men in that particular regiment is to just type in wildcard, ARG, wildcard, and that's going to find everything that has the word Argyll in. So it'll be Princess Alexandra's Argyll and Southern, or Princess Louise's Argyll and Southern Highlanders, different combinations of that word. And the aim is that you want to have as wide a field of results as possible. So that's why you use the wildcards. So here's a worked example. In the following example, we're going to try and ascertain when Great Uncle Richard joined the Duke of Cornwall's Light Infantry. We know he's killed in action in August 1918. We've found his medal card, but we know that no service record survives, and we want to try and find out more. So here he is. This is again a medal index card from the Western Front Association. It shows you there that he arrived in France as a private with the Duke of Cornwall's Light Infantry in the number 38028. He subsequently joined the 3rd London Regiment and had another number, and then there's another number, his 6-digit number for that regiment as well, 255432. So that's all we've got for him. There'll be medal rolls as well, but and there'll be information about his death. But in terms of service, that's pretty much it. And that was the sort of problem I was faced with when I was researching my men from Chailey and thinking, come on now, 38028. What does that tell me? Can I find any information out about that, when he joined and when he transferred? So look, this is how you do it. Go to Findmypast, go to search, and then go to A to Z of records. And as I say, start typing in British Army Service Records, and you'll see that as you type, the collections will appear below. So there you have British Army Service Records and a British Army Service Records image browse. Well, you want the first one. You don't want the browse in this case. You want the first one. So in this case, I've gone to the British Army Service Records and I've just started typing in the first 3 digits of Richard's number, and I've typed in regiment. I'm not typing in Duke of Cornwall's Light Infantry because it's too long. And what if we've indexed records as DCLI or Cornwall or whatever reason? Type in as few characters as possible, but put the wildcards in as well. So this is what happens. As you type that in, you can see there's 21 results. So there's number 380 with a wildcard. and there's the Cornwall with the wildcard as well. And here are the results. Now remember, we're looking for numbers close to 38028, and you can see there's a number. There you go, 38038, 38008, 38016, 38010. So all those men have service records, and we're going to look at all of them. I'm not going to go through all of them now, but that's what you would do. So there you are. Just to recap, 38028 for Richard Stevens, and those there's some more records there, and you can see that Alfred George James is 38029. So his number is one higher than the man we're looking for. So let's have a look at Richard James's record. What's it? Or Alfred James, rather. There you go. So it says he joined on enlistment the Duke of Cornwall's Light Infantry, and like our man, he also transferred to the Royal Fusiliers. And there you go, you've got some great information there. So this particular man attested on the 16th of October 1916, but was mobilised on the 3rd of January 1918, and that's when his number was issued. He was posted to the 3rd Battalion on the 3rd of January 1918, and he transferred to the Royal Fusiliers on the 16th of August 1918. So you've got all that information there, and the fact that his number is just one digit different from the man we're looking for, and you've got his date there, that he joined on the 3rd of January 1918, suggests that that's when Richard joined as well, and that also he probably transferred to the Royal Fusiliers on the 16th of August 1918. So, based on the information in Alfred James's record, we can now say with reasonable confidence that Richard Stevens joined the DCLI on the 3rd of Jan 1918, and that he transferred to the Royal Fusiliers on the 16th of August 1918. And if you wanted to prove that point, you'd need to go back and look at more records and try and find more evidence. But that's a very strong indication, based on somebody else's service record, that that's when your man joined and that's when your man transferred. And that's the best you can do in most cases, because so many records were destroyed in the bombing in the Second World War. I mean, you see different figures, but 60% is generally seems to be the figure that's accepted by most. Although some regiments have more than their fair share of surviving records, and other regiments, actually, the Duke of Cornwall's Light Infantry and the Devonshire Regiment seem to be particularly poor, have very few records surviving. But that's the logic. You can view medal rolls on the Naval and Military Archive, transcriptions, so that's part of the Naval and Military Press. You can view the records there, and you can view war diaries there as well, for that matter. So there's Richard Stevens' transcription. So it's not images, it's a transcription, but you can view the transcriptions there. But that's a paid site. So there's just some points to remember. Regimental numbers are not unique. Searching for number 1234 on the National Archives index card search yields 284 results. Nevertheless, if you know the regiment and the battalion, knowing the man's number can help you pinpoint when he joined. As a general rule, regimental numbers for regular battalions are uncomplicated and largely sequential up until 1914, but it becomes more complicated from December 1915. And you'll find shortcuts on my blog, albeit the main coverage is to 1916 only. But it's reasonably easy to research numbers yourself, provided you have access to Findmypast. And as I say, Findmypast does offer the most flexible solution to finding service records. You'd expect me to say that as an employee of Findmypast, but I'm also telling you that it's the truth. I use Findmypast daily for this type of exercise when I'm researching different men, either medals I've bought or particular regiments I have an interest in at a particular time. I use it all the time. So that's how to do it, and I recommend you explore and try it yourself. We got to number series 4, and that was the number series we've been talking about just now. From 1920, a new number series was introduced, which simplified things enormously. So this was Army Order 388 of 9th of August 1920, which read, a soldier when posted to a corps on enlistment will be signed an army number in that corps. Whether originally enlisted for service in the regular army, the militia, which had now replaced the Special Reserve and Extra Reserve, or the Territorial Army, and it's Territorial Army now rather than Territorial Force, they retained that number from that number series throughout their service, irrespective of any subsequent posting. So you might join the Essex Regiment and be given a 7-digit number, and if you joined the West Surrey Regiment the following day, or if you were posted there, transferred there, you still keep your Essex Regiment number. So it definitely simplified matters. And as far as you're concerned, if you're researching people with those 7-digit post-1920 Army numbers, you need to beat a path to the MOD's door, because they still have the service records which you can apply for. There is go to Veterans UK, type in Veterans UK into Google or other search engines, and you'll get to the Veterans UK website, which will show you what you need to do to request a service record. That's it. That's all from me, folks. I hope you found my talk interesting. By all means, post comments on Facebook. Drop me a line if you want to visit my blog, whatever. I'll be happy to answer questions, and I hope it's been interesting. Stay safe, and thank you.